every area of life that interests you can inform your game design in the same way that there's no topic that's wasted for an author. Uh, if the author is interested in history, that's going to help their writing. They're interested in linguistics, that's going to help the writing. If they're interested in math, that's going to help the writing. And all that is true for games as well.
How did you get into games? What's your earliest memory you have with a game?
Well, my earliest memories are probably not that illustrative. I remember, I think the oldest one I remember is Uncle Wiggily, which is not a particularly um, uh, great game, but uh, I I dabbled in games throughout my elementary school and my elementary school years. But it wasn't until I found Dungeons and Dragons in, I guess it was '77, that I really embraced games as a hobby.
Hmm. Hmm. And at that time, what were you doing outside of games, and what did those first D&D sessions look like?
Well, when I first found Dungeons and Dragons, it wasn't readily available, and so I was excited enough by the idea that I designed my own version. And Dungeons and Dragons is so orthogonal to any games that I was familiar with that my game was nothing like Dungeons and Dragons. It was more just like a regular board game, and when I finally did get it, I played with friends. I ran the games all the time, and the reason, there are a couple reasons why Dungeons and Dragons was so formative. Um, Not only was it because it blew my mind as to what was possible with games, uh, but also because when you play, whether you're the player or the person running the game, you're put into a position where you're doing game design
Mm.
and and you have a certain responsibility for your game fun. You don't put that all onto the game designers. You take responsibility for it. You're tinkering with the system. You really are making a lot of the fun. And so those two things really helped with my game career, both because it just inspired me to search wide and far and wide for games that would that would um, teach me more about games, and also because it trained me to take responsibility for my gameplay experiences.
Yeah. And what do you consider that your first prototype or that first attempt at game design? The version of Dungeons and Dragons, or
I think it was. I think. I mean, I designed uh, games before that. They were all sort of outdoor games, weird
Mhm.
tag type games and things like that. But that was the first board game that I remember um, designing. And over the next few years, I designed lots of board games, uh, and continued to design them going forward.
Yeah. Did you form some kind of practice when it comes to game design? Like I've read about like the writer Neil Gaiman. He'd every day he'd sit down specifically to write, or Jerry Seinfeld, or lots of people. Do you have some form of like daily practice when it comes to game design, or is it more sporadic?
Yeah, there's no, excuse me.
That's all right.
Um, I yeah, I have no routine or yeah, nothing that I force myself to do as far as game design goes. Throughout my career, I have been driven by what interests me in games, and so there's been no shortage. It's like I will fill my hours with game design and with also gameplay, which I view both as very important. Uh, I learned when I was at Wizards that when I was not playing games, that my design wasn't as good.
Mm.
And On the other hand, when I play a lot of games, my I'm overflowing with ideas, and so that's certainly part of my engine is playing games.
Yeah. Do you think it's important for new designers to play a lot of games, or do you think that there's a good ratio for you? Like,
Well, I I hesitate to prescribe for new designers because everybody's different, and I've met many designers who have different approaches. But I'll say what's worked for me, which is that there's no limit to how much I will play, but there's a special value to playing games outside your comfort zone and playing games which you don't immediately like, and learning what makes those games popular for the audience. Uh, and uh, and and that practice has been really useful for me because it's helped me identify lots of parts of games which which I can incorporate into my own design. And it's also made me a more given me a more satisfying gameplay life because when I learn what the audience likes about the game, oftentimes I learn to like that too. And your life is just better when you like lots of things. So that's my practice. And that goes that's informed a lot of my design. For example, I've gone in college. I hadn't played too much chess, and so I set up a chess ladder and sort of made myself um, learn to play it and learn to like it. And then lots of different card games I did that with. I did that with war games. I've done it with things which you might not expect, like Monopoly,
mm,
where everybody has fun putting down Monopoly, but it's very easy to write it off as being bad design. But you my philosophy has been that you should really first, there are things there that appeal to people, find what those are. And so I've done that exercise. And yeah, one of my games, Half Truth, was directly from this philosophy. It's Half Truth is a trivia game, and I read this book on trivia by Ken Jennings, and I was he just really got me to understand what his love of trivia was, and I realized that I hadn't actually learned to love trivia, and I could see everything he was talking about, and how I'd always viewed trivia as being this very niche thing which rewarded specialization, and he explained it as being something which was at its roots, a very broad, an egalitarian game, which is what I really love in games, because you never know who's going to know what answer. And so Half Truth came from my reading this book, realizing that it was a form of game which I didn't love yet, or didn't know I loved yet, and then trying to design a game which really brought out what he was talking about.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to work. I've never thought about trying that. Or I do try lots of different games that I haven't tried, but kind of learning about why something that you haven't really found fun is really cool. Do you work with any restrictions in game design, or is that one of your restrictions?
I don't work. Uh, there's a few ways to answer that. Um, for the most part, I don't work with restrictions. I'm guided by what interests me, and that often leads me to design things which I don't see. So if there's a lot of deck builders out there, for example, I'm not likely to build a deck builder like the ones that are out there. Even though I could probably sit down and, it's fun to take a game and like this that's brilliant like Ascension and say, okay, I'm going to design Ascension but my way. And I'm sure that whatever I would do, I wouldn't say that it would be better than Ascension, but it would be as good in its own way. Um, that doesn't interest me as much as sort of seeing things which don't really exist and then trying to provide that. Um, and so I look for holes and look for in my game uh, in my game closet, and I look for um, things that interest me, which can come from anywhere, because games is such a wonderful uh, I never know what to call it. Art, media, pastime. There's no word which really encompasses it, but it's infused with it's everywhere throughout life and throughout my life in particular, and so it's just a joy to explore different avenues.
Mm-hmm. What separates a good game from a great game for you, or what are some games that you really admire or enjoy or love?
I the thing I respond to most in games is whether they can be played indefinitely. Um, games are. I used to back in the 80s. I used to think that there was an analog between games and movies or games and books, and I would sort of look down on people who played few games because that was analogous to not seeing many movies or not reading many
Mm,
books, and I knew so many people who just played no games or played just a couple games. Um, and it wasn't until the 90s that I began to reevaluate that and realize that the most exciting thing about games for me was that how often they became better the more you played them. And uh, and so and so once I recognized that as being something that I really loved in games and that was very broadly within games, um, I rearranged that. I realized that people who spend their lifetime playing a game, that's kind of natural. Uh, there may be a lot of stuff out there which they haven't explored and that they would enjoy, but it's hard to compete with the value that a game can give you when you really go deep. And so that's always been one of the things which I love most in games is that they just keep getting better. Now, I do like disposable games as well, and I like game experiences which are like, oh, I see what's going on, and then you're done with them, or it's not as good. So I don't mean to dismiss those because those can all have their special value. Escape the room
Yeah.
type games are, for example, there, and they're fine. But that is my, is like my go-to for what I really love in games, and for that reason, I think that the games are more analogous to music than to books or movies, because music can do the same thing where just over your lifetime it can mean different things, and the better you know it, the more it can give you.
Yeah, yeah, you can keep going back to it, and yeah. Um, what what do you think makes that replayability? Or I know some games certainly where after you play them, you immediately want to play again or immediately want to go back to them. Other games, while you're playing, sometimes you have to force yourself to stay for the other players that may be enjoying it. But what are some ways? And all of the games that I've played of yours, I feel like they have that first time play experience has always been good for me. But also, they are games that you can keep going back to. So. What do you think are things that you can add as a designer to games to make them more replayable? And yeah.
Well, there's certainly one technique which I lean on a lot is tweaking the game system within the game parameters. So what I mean there is you come up with you've got a game, and then you introduce lots of cards or special powers, and ideally, that you don't play with all of them every game. You play with some subset, and that gives you a very rich landscape of games to explore. But that's certainly not the only way. To go back to classic games like chess and Go, and card games like bridge, or even hearts or something like that. These games also have that quality that they get better over time the more you know them, and they don't rely on this sort of technique. So it's a technique which you can use, but is not. It's sufficient, but it isn't necessary. And it's easy to understand why that technique works to bring out a lot of variety. But will your game have that without that technique? That's harder to determine on a case. You have to do that on a case by case basis, or at least I don't know any unifying way to determine that. I think I had something else to say, but I'm drawing a blank. So maybe I'll
That's okay.
return to it if I remember.
Yep, for sure, for sure. How do you go about playtesting your games? What does that look like?
My early playtests tend to be solo, and I find that oftentimes I will make a prototype, and even by the time I finish making the prototype, I know the changes I need to make. But then I sit down and I start playing with it, and I realize it's lacking, or that they're just things that need to be rearranged with the design or the my approach. And I make lots of prototypes, and then after that, usually I try to get players in, and my play sessions after that, I've got a lot of friends who love testing games, and they're very patient with my designs. And usually my first few play tests will be one play test, and then I'll redesign the game, maybe two. After that, after it's sort of in the ballpark of what I want, then I'll play test a lot, and I'll send it to other people to play test, and I'll ideally get people to play test it, from the rules without me sort of guiding them, because there's it's often a problem when a designer sort of tells you how you're supposed to play. For the first play test where you're just getting it, where you know how you want it to be played, and you tell people that, that's fine. But once you've got the final game, you've got to make sure that people will figure out how to play from what they're given. And then my most important uh, skill, the most important piece of advice, I guess, for dealing with playtesters, though, is that everything they say almost always is correct. The thing is that as a designer and a developer, you have to learn what it is they're trying to say, and that's often not what they're saying. So they always have their finger on a problem, but they often don't know what that problem is. And so, for example, they may in a game say that a card is too powerful or that a card is too weak, and you know that with advanced play or proper play that card's not too weak or that card's not too powerful. But the thing is that they're getting that experience anyway, and so there's something about your game that you can often address to make it so that they don't think that's like, either they see how to use it or that it's not that important to them. Like they don't care as much if a strategy is bad, as long as they've got strategies that they're drawn to that are good. And so they might complain about a particular strategy not working. That might not be what that might be saying is that they're having trouble finding a strategy that resonates with them, that satisfies them, whatever their psychographic is. And if you are able to introduce that, suddenly the fact that the original strategy didn't work isn't as important. Anyway, there's an art to interpreting what people's feedback is, but always begin with the idea that they've got they're trying to say something, and even if it's demonstrably not true, they're still saying something which is important.
Yeah, so you're trying to interpret what those players are saying and why it is they're feeling that way, even if it's not objectively true for the game. Yeah, that's great. Part of what I do, or one of my main things, is I run a blind playtesting company, and we do blind tests for a lot of different publishers and a lot of first-time designers as well. And that is like one of the most important things, I think, is for designers to be able to kind of hear feedback and decide what to do with that feedback, because it's you often, when you start hearing things, the same things every time, it's your job as the designer is to figure out what that means. So yeah.
If I could just add to that, one of the things which I regard as a mistake that often comes about in in designing and playtesting games is to try to balance the game for the top level of player. And that's I think that's a fool's errand to begin with, because if your game has the sort of depth which I look for in a game, you can't know what the top level player is. And so first of all, it's something that's very difficult to shoot for. But second of all, if your game's balanced for the top level player, that means it's suboptimal for the average player or the beginning player. And so there's this balancing act you have to do to make it appealing to as broad a group as possible. At least, if that's what you plan if you want your audience to be as broad as possible,
Yeah.
that's something I want to do. Now, that's not for everybody. Some people want to make a game especially for very hardcore players, and that's its own thing.
Yeah.
But there's an example that I came up with, which has stayed with me, and really illustrated that, which was for a game I did, Spectromancer. A Spectromancer is a digital game, and we gave away the priest class within it. It's a card game, effectively a card game, and the other classes you purchased. And so there was this belief among the players that the priest class was the weakest. Now we expected that because that's what you would expect people to believe it's the weakest, but we didn't know if it was true. We didn't intentionally choose it to be the weakest. We chose it because it is the class in the game that had the most flexibility and therefore showed the most different mechanics. So we ran some tests, and we found that that for beginners it was pretty weak. It was 45%. It's a two-person game, so and that was about as big a swing as you got. But for advanced players, it was 55%, and in intermediate, it was about even. And the reason for that is easy to see because for advanced players, flexibility is intrinsically skill testing, and so of course this is a better class for people who know what they're doing. On the other hand, there was a class, the Necromancer, which everybody complained about. Beginners, that was 55%. Advanced players, it was 45%. And that's because it had some very powerful cards if you didn't know how to play around it. But once you did, you could handle it. So there were like 8 or 10 classes, and there were some that were really good for beginners, some that were good for intermediate, and some that were good for advanced players. And I think that's about as good as you can shoot for. You don't want to have them all designed for advanced players or all beginning players. And so having it so that that there's something for everybody to gravitate to really worked well for it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a mistake also. I find that it sounds to me like if you're going for just experienced players, also that sounds like it's not as elegant of a game. Because I think what you want for new players is that accessibility and those like easier to play things. You mentioned those statistics. Is that something that you balance around, or do you think balance is more about feeling what is the correct balance?
Certainly, I go more with feeling until it's an established game. The only time I go with statistics are when you've got a really good source of statistics, like with the digital game, you've got all that data. Then that can help you a lot in sort of assessing where the game is. And then a game that is as big and as seriously played as Magic, you've got lots of data there also, and so you can use that for your balancing. But when you're first making a game, much more about feeling, in part because you've got to make these calls about the balance for beginners, intermediate, advanced players. And as you said, this balancing, keeping beginners in mind for your game is more important these days than ever because, when I was growing up, there just weren't that many games. And so when I got one, I it's like I had to learn to love it, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have, it's going to be hard for me to find another.
Yeah.
And these days, that's not true. These days, people will play half the game and then say, I'm done with this, and go to another. And it's in some cases, in some ways that's a shame, um, because there are a lot of games often behind the barrier of many plays. But for somebody who wants to design these days, I think you it's going to be really hard to get people past those plays that are required if that's too many or they're too difficult.
Yeah, yeah, that happens very often nowadays. I remember when I was growing up, we had Axis and Allies Stratego and like two more games, and you just play them again and again. And now it's there's so much out there that most games never get a second play.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it's something I always come back to is like I love playing new games and seeing what makes them tick, and like as I said, learning what makes them popular among their audience, even if it doesn't immediately appeal to me. But I have to discipline myself to go back and play my favorites, because there is so much value in really getting to know games and playing them throughout your life.
Yeah. So there's so much talk now, or there's so many new games with new unique twists. What are some of those twists that you've really liked that have made an impression on you, and what do you think is a way to find twists in games? So I'm talking about games like, for me, maybe The Crew is one of those games where it takes trick taking and makes it cooperative, or The Mind, another similar one where it's got that time as that time element as something that really makes it stand out. What are some of your favorite twists in games, or some new things that you found in games, and what do you think the future of might bring?
Well, the thing that comes first to mind is not board game, but digital. The auto battlers these days are it's a very exciting game category for me, and that's because it really feels like it bridges paper games with digital in a way that hasn't been done before. And when I say bridges, because it is just a digital game, what I mean is that when I play it, I feel like I'm playing a paper game, which is not. Very few games have given me that feeling before. Most of them feel like something. They feel like a simulation or something that is more sport-like than board game-like. But the sort of play that goes on with an auto battler, it's tickling the same parts of my brain that I get when I'm playing a really exciting board game. So I found those endlessly engaging, and I know I've talked with a lot of designers. A lot of them are taking concepts from that and trying to get them into board games. And there you get to a game like Challengers, which is a very derivative of I should say, inspired from a auto battler basis, and so I'm really excited by that category, both as a digital thing and what it might do for paper games as well.
Yeah, could you explain what an auto battler is for people that haven't heard the term?
Sure, which is very reasonable if you hadn't heard of it. In particular, if what you're being driven by is paper games, there's no reason why you necessarily would have heard of it. An auto battler is a game. They're digital games in which you typically what you're doing is you're picking your army in some fashion, and you're deploying it in some fashion. So that might be just like drafting cards in a game like Seven Wonders, and deploying it might be just choosing what order they go in. But then once you've picked your cards for a round and you deployed them, then you battle against somebody else and your cards automatically fight. So you're not making decisions while it's going, you're just watching. And it's very fast. And the reason why, and then you go and you do another round, you modify your army, you upgrade it, you deploy them in a different way, and you repeat this until you have a winner. And the reason this feels like a paper game is because, as I said, you're effectively drafting cards. The reason why it's so good for digital is because you can resolve these battles fast with the computer, and there's no busy work on your part. So one of the things when I've tried to adapt this myself to paper games, I keep running into the feeling that oh, this is pretty good, but it would be better on a computer. And so you don't want to make a game which would be better on a computer. You want to make a game which is its own thing. And so there's a lot of room, I think, Challengers has done a better job than I did with my prototypes in that regard. Now, I have to say for myself, I like Challengers better on the computer also. And it's because even though they've done much better than I did as far as getting it to be sort of as good a paper experience as you could get, it's still a little too much busy work for me. So I think there's some really interesting game opportunities there for paper game designers. And for people who just like games broadly, there's a lot of opportunity for digital games which feel like board games. As I said, they might tickle the same part of your brain that you get tickled when you play an excellent board game.
Yeah, for sure. What are some games that you're most proud of designing, and why?
Well, it's hard not to lead with Magic there. Magic was a very exciting game design for me. I was it was one I was blown away with the possibilities that one could have if everybody had their own deck, and just really enjoyed exploring it, and was very gratified for many years, to this day, really, that people have loved it so much, and it opened all the doors I could have opened as far as game design goes. It allowed me to explore what I want. Outside of Magic, Keyforge more recently did some things for me that Magic did. I felt like I was exploring something in some ways as innovative, and so for those who don't know Keyforge, the key idea there is that everybody has a unique deck, which when you first hear that, you think, oh, that's like Magic, and then but when you understand what it really means, that it really means that everybody has a unique deck. Not one that you choose, but one that every deck is different. They've got different card backs and different contents. Then they usually realize, oh yeah, there really is something different going on there. And that was designed in particular to try to recapture some of the magic that was lost in Magic when the cards became sort of this commodity. I love where Magic ended up, and there's a lot of people who really love tournament Magic, for example, but I was always much more interested in sort of the limited environments that you get with drafts and with leagues and so forth, and in a way, Keyforge, that was what it was about, playing with a small set of tools that you have to learn how to use as best you can, rather than going through a big collection trying to find the best tools. And then, Half Truth really is. I mentioned it earlier. I really am very happy with that design. With Half Truth, as I mentioned, I began with this idea of trying to make trivia as broad as possible. And so, to that end, a question in Half Truth has six answers. It's multiple choice, and there's three correct and three incorrect answers. And you are given the biggest reward. You're given the lion's share of the points if you can just get one of the answers correct. But you can press your luck and try to get more answers. But every extra answer you try to get, if you fail one of them, you get nothing. And if you succeed, you don't get exponentially more, you get just a little more. And that mitigates the advantage that somebody who has a lot of knowledge has, because if they press their luck or happen to just know the answers, they're only getting a little more. And if they misstep, then they lose it all. And so this turned out to really work as far as making it so that you're very rewarded for skill, and yet the very skillful players don't have as much of an edge as they do in most trivia games. And the question format it just felt like each one was a little game you play with players, because if they can eliminate one, they've got a little bit of an advantage, and sometimes and so you can do things like one of them is, which of these are droids from Star Wars, and maybe you have no idea what the droids from Star Wars are, but the negative answers are all rapper names that happen to have names that sounded a lot like droids from Star Wars. So then you could say, oh, wait a minute, I know that's a rapper. And you can cross that off. And then if you recognize that as sort of being the negative categories, maybe you can cross them all off and then just get all three correct without knowing a single droid. Anyway, it felt like there was a lot of range to what was possible with this limited palette of trivia questions that were created for this game.
Yeah. Do you work on a lot of games at once, or do you shelf games? Do you come back to games?
Both. I work on lots of games at once, and I shelve lots of games and return to them. I often find myself going through my old games, which either I couldn't find a publisher for, or I wasn't happy with for one reason or another. And I find that the design work in them is applicable to whatever one of the projects I'm working on, or I have a new way to look at it, and I think I can improve it. So my game closet is a source of sort of constant inspiration for my future design, and so then, and that I think is a really healthy place. A healthy way to view your design, because in that way, I never feel like I've wasted my time with a design that goes nowhere. It's in the closet. There's some stuff there that's useful, and it'll be there to contribute at some point in the future.
Yeah. And when starting a new game, you mentioned trying to find something new that's fun to you, or something that you didn't find fun before. What are some other ways you start a game? Or is there anything that you do to get ideas for games, or which ideas do you choose to act on? And when is it that you decide to shelf a game?
There's a lot of parts to that.
Sorry about that.
The easiest one though is the shelving. When I'm working on a game, after I have play tested it and redesigned it a certain number of times, there's no hard number, but there's a certain number of time I decided I will decide I'm going in circles, and I will closet it, and so that's just I guess there's no hard answer there, but I find that, something like three redesigns, and I'm done with it. As far as where I get my inspiration from, what inspires me, there's all sorts of places. Um, I will name a few. Uh, so one, which hopefully will come out this year, but maybe next year. I read this book, Radical Markets, and it had these economic systems, which I had never thought about before or heard of. And oftentimes when I don't understand a system, um, I try to design a game to understand it. And often that isn't something which is intended to be published, and it's only intended to teach me what's going on. And so I will play it with myself, or I will play it with some friends, and then it'll be done, right? And I've done games on evolution like that, and other areas of economics, and even one on astrophysics. Um, but this one was special. This one I felt like, wow, this has some game concepts here, which really I think would be more broadly appreciated. Um, and so I brought the game to GMT, and we're working on getting that out sometime, again, not too distant future, hopefully. Um, so that game came from just my regular curiosity and exploring systems. Another area of motivation might be, and this one has informed a bunch of my game design, but I don't think I've got a game out which currently uses it. But with deck building games, I played lots of them. I love them, both digital and analog. Um, but one thing that drove me crazy was how often the correct move in the games are to get rid of cards and to thin your deck, and to not get new cards. And the reason why this drives me crazy, and I still love those games, and I think that's a great thing, but it seems crazy that so many are that way. When they call them deck builders, but they're actually sort of misnamed. They're like deck crafters or something.
Yeah, deck thinners.
And it's super counterintuitive to beginners, because you have something like Dominion, where one of the most fundamental thing is, oh, you've got to get rid of your copper. Now, in what other game is it good to get rid of money? It's like, why? How does that make any sense? And so, I began designing lots of games myself where they, this where this wasn't a part of it. There's lots of different ways to do it, and I've seen more and more that are going in this direction anyway. But you do things like make it so that for example, all your cards are improvements on the old cards, or there actually is no thinning. You can only add and dilute. Or one of the techniques I came up with was you play your entire deck every turn, or you play half your deck every turn. That is like, and the basic idea there is, if you add more copper to your deck, does it get worse? And there's lots of different ways to answer that so that it doesn't. That's for me a very interesting design hook. And so that while that has not resulted in any games which I have out right now, it has resulted in a lot of my time spent, and I think it's a very interesting mechanical area.
Yeah. I love deck building. I love seeing also in deck building, there's so much you can do. Like, I've seen a catch-up mechanic where if you've played like Mage Knight, how you get blank cards like wounds, or I'm sure lots of other deck builders do that as well. But I've seen that as a catch-up mechanic where when you draw those blank cards that are negative for you, they give you a bigger draw of hands, or all sorts of little twists. And I think that's a great medium.
Yeah.
For innovation.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with it, and I still really enjoy sitting down to a new deck builder because I'm curious what they brought to the table, and there's a lot of ideas that still are out there when I play a new one.
Yeah. To go back to a little bit to playtesting and player feedback, how do you balance that player, or how do you know which player feedback to take seriously? I mean, you said they're always right in feeling the way that they feel, but is there sometimes where you decide, I'm not going to address this feedback? I know that's in the game, but that isn't part of my vision for the game.
Yeah, that I mean that definitely comes up as well. Keyforge is a really good example of that. Um, with Keyforge, as I said, you have unique decks. There's no deck building, and Keyforge really made me look for another term for trading card game because it is very much not a trading card game because the entire idea is you can't change your deck. On the other hand, it's disingenuous to say it isn't related to trading card games because it feels very trading card gamey. So I started using this term, which I don't think is going to catch on because it's a pretty ugly term, but massively modular games. Um, and and so when it was being play tested, Fantasy Flight had, I don't know, 60 different playtest groups, and it was pretty negatively received. Um, I mean, there were some groups that really loved it, but there were a lot that really didn't like it, couldn't get into it. And when you think about it, there's a really good reason for that, and that's because the people who are signing up to playtest trading card game like games are people who have been selected very heavily for liking to build a deck. And this game is not about building decks. This game is about taking the deck you have and seeing how well you can do with it. And so we had lots of playtest feedback there that in the end, what I said is true. They were complaining about things that are genuinely real, but they were genuinely also not the audience. And it's something which I really credit Fantasy Flight with, that they went through with it afterwards, despite the mixed feedback that they got from their playtest groups, and they went ahead with the vision. And when it came out, it found audiences. It was actually quite successful, sold lots and lots of decks, had some very dedicated communities who immediately really loved the idea of being able to play these games that they had liked, but they just couldn't take the deck building that was in them because deck building is such a specific and time-consuming skill that they didn't have the time for or the interest in or whatever. But with Keyforge, they could play the games that they liked without engaging in that.
Yeah. I love Keyforge, by the way, just for that, because you get it and it's a full game, and it's great, to see what that deck is and make the best of it, and learn about it. Do you think that mathematics helps you in game design, or do you think that game designers need to be decent mathematicians?
I think math helps, but you don't need a PhD. You need the math that's useful for designing games. I think is math you can learn on the streets, like if you know poker and you can handle the odds and you can sort of deal with the probabilities of it, then I think you're fine. I think that every area of life that interests you can inform your game design in the same way that there's no topic that's wasted for an author. If the author is interested in history, that's going to help the writing. If they're interested in linguistics, that's going to help the writing. If they're interested in math, that's going to help the writing. And all that is true for games as well. So math is useful, but I sort of see it in the same category.
Do you have favorite game designers?
Oh, uh, that's the sort of question which I always feel is a dangerous to answer because I'm sure I'll forget
Yeah,
some.
yeah.
Um, but I've got lots of favorite game designers. I've got lots of that I go to. I admire a lot of other designs. I mean, uh, it's not risky to mention older designers like Sid Saxon, who was really formative for me. Sid Saxon did this. He did a number of books, but Gamut of Games was particularly inspiring to me. In it, he talked about lots of games and variations of games, and there were games that he had found, and games that he had designed, and games that his friends had designed, and games that he had improved on. And that's the approach which I live basically because to me, with him, it was clearly about a love for games, not a love for his games. He was very happy, bringing up other people's games and classic games, and very excited to share those with you as the reader, and share his thoughts on them. And that's basically how I like to see myself. And From some of the modern designers that are still extant. I really like Antoine Bauza. Uh,
Mm.
his Seven Wonders was marvelous, and Hanabi is still my favorite cooperative game. I think um, I like I like the genre of cooperative games, but have frustration with uh, people playing each other's positions. Um, and I just love his game sort of turns out on the head because the hidden information is so integral to the game that nobody ever can play anybody else's positions, and it just feels genuinely like a cooperative game, not a solo game that everybody's sort of working on together. And um, Wolfgang Kramer
Mm.
was I love the breadth of his game design. I always consider it a plus when I see his name on the box. And I mean, he has done such sort of classic Euro games, but then he's done things like uh, uh, Zex Nimmt, Six Takes It, which is like when I sat down and played that, it was like, where did this game come from? It's so different than anything I had played before, and everybody once they just play a round of it, they sort of understand it and play it at a different level. It's just a marvelous game, and I really respond to that in a designer, the breadth of their design, and um, uh, for that reason, actually, you mentioned Mage Knights, and I always butcher his name, so I don't
Yeah.
want to
Vladek
please
Vatil.
use it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, he's outstanding
Yeah.
again for breadth.
Yeah.
But all the game, it's like, but not just breadth, of course, quality within that. He's got excellent strategy games, excellent party games. He's got everything, and so I really like breadth of design in my designers. But yeah, so there's lots of designers I love. I'm sorry if I didn't mention you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Fantastic. And back to the classic game design question, which I feel like should should be thought about is the theme of the game versus the mechanics of the game. Do you prefer starting with one specific theme or a mechanic, or I'm sure it's different for different games, but
It is. I do both. I think I'm more mechanically inclined, but I have examples of both. So examples of that. King of Tokyo was entirely mechanically inspired. I was explicitly trying to make a version of Yahtzee that had a theme and was interactive. And beginning with that as sort of my homework project, we ended up with King of Tokyo. And before it was King of Tokyo, it was generic fantasy. And I use generic fantasy often as a placeholder. It's not where I intend, not always where I intend to be. It's and so when my playtesters play a game with generic fantasy, it's just because it's a convenient, it has a lot of convenient shorthands. And so it makes it useful for a placeholder. But and then more often than not, the publishers will push it back to fantasy, even though that's not what I give them. Yellow didn't. They let me do my giant kaiju. Um, but for example, I did this game. Oh, what's it called? Um, well, I forget what it's called, but it's a dice game with and it was with Amigo, Heroes of something. Anyway, it's got a fantasy theme. It's got some animals with swords and collecting bounties. When I gave it to them, it was actually a baking theme, and you were baking cakes, and so you'll often get this thing where the publisher thinks, well, Richard Garfield, he's going to get more people if it's got a little bit more fantasy involved, and so I get pushed there, and that was true also with Treasure Hunter. Treasure Hunter ended up fantasy theme, was originally science fiction themed, and anyway, so that's a game which was mechanically inclined. I did this game, but The Hunger was entirely flavor driven. I liked the idea of the vampires becoming more and more bloated from their feeding and not being able to get back home. And so that's where I began. In fact, actually, I began with the name, which was originally Fat Dracula. And so I love that name so much that I designed a whole game around it. And then we didn't even use the name. And you can see this is actually a microcosm. The question of theme versus mechanics is you see in microcosm within games. So when you design like magic cards, that's often a question. Do you begin with this card which is mechanically interesting, or do you begin with this concept and try to build a card around it? And again, both ways. And I wouldn't want to get rid of either of them, because you get some really good designs when you just give somebody sometimes a name, like, oh, make a card with this name, and then that just gives you these ideas, and you can end up with this wonderfully flavorful, mechanically interesting card. But then oftentimes also you come up with this marvelous mechanic, and you have to come up with a theme for it.
Yeah, fantastic. And to finish up, a question I ask all designers, and I do realize that most questions are aimed at this, but what would be one piece of advice you would have for somebody who's new to game design? Or it can be one piece of advice that you've taken that's made the biggest change to the way that you see game design.
Well, my biggest advice is one which I've already shared in this interview, which is to play lots of games, and to play games that you can learn from, which is to say, you don't know why they're good, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that. I believe it's enriched my life and my design. Um, Now I know game designers who actually intentionally uh, don't want to play other designs, and their reasoning there is they don't want to pollute their their ideas with they don't want to be influenced in some undue way. I that I come from mathematics. I was going to be an academic in mathematics, and so I view it very similar to the way I do mathematics. You've got this common ground, and you share your mathematics, and people take that and they do wonderful things with it. And if you try to do mathematics in a bubble, if you're if you're brilliant, you'll do something really good. But I believe if you're brilliant and you weren't in a bubble, you do something even better. And the same thing can be said for game design. I think that you're better off standing on the shoulders of giants than you are trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the interview. That is really good advice, I think.
Thank you. Always fun to talk about games.
Yeah, yeah.